Hello everyone, let us continue with the topic drug induced toxicity, and the next type of toxicity that we are going to cover today is the local toxicity. Okay. Now what do you mean by local toxicity? Okay, so it is the toxicity in the local accessible regions of the body. Okay, so as the name implies, local. Okay, local means something which is accessible and in a restricted part of the body. Okay, so here the restricted region of the body and which are accessible, these are the skin. Okay, so we are going to cover the toxicity towards the skin, that is known as dermal toxicity. Okay, then the next is the ocular toxicity, that is the toxicity towards the eye. Okay, because we instill certain drugs into the eye, or the eye may come in contact with certain toxicants very easily. And the next type of toxicity is the ototoxicity. So the term auto means the ear. Okay, so toxicity relating to the ear, because sometimes the drugs are instilled into the ear for their local action, or they may also act systemically onto the ear to produce some type of toxic reactions. Okay, so these are the three types of local toxicities that we are going to cover today. So to begin with the dermal toxicity. Okay, so toxicity towards the skin. Okay, so before going into the actual toxicity, let us see what exactly are the anatomical and the physiological features of the skin. Okay, so skin, it is, you all must have studied under the integumentary system. Okay, so skin, it is also known as the cutaneous membrane, which covers the external surface of the body. Okay, so by surface area, if you consider, it is the largest organ of the body as far as surface area is considered. Okay, so it covers almost the entire body. In certain regions it is covered by mucous membrane, but most of our body externally it is covered by the skin. Okay, so skin, it consists of two main parts, that is there are two layers. Okay, that is epidermis, which is the outer layer, and the dermis, which is a deeper layer. Okay, so epidermis, it is basically composed of epithelial tissue, and the dermis, it is basically composed of the dense irregular connective tissue, which is containing the collagen and the elastic fibers. Okay, and in most of the regions of the body, this outer layer epidermis, it has four layers, that is stratum basale, stratum spinosum, stratum granulosum, and stratum corneum. Okay, so this is the picture depicting the structure of the skin. Okay, so in most of the regions the skin is covered with the hair. So you can see here hair shafts which grow on the skin. Okay, so depending upon the region, the scarcity of the hair will depend as to which area it is. There are certain regions in the body wherein the hair are absent also. Okay, so most of the skin, it is covered with the hair. Okay, now if you can see over here, it shows a cross sectional area. So here you can see the epidermis, which is the outer layer, and this region is the dermis. Okay, so this region of the body, that is the skin, it is richly supplied by the blood. You can see here blood vessels which are supplying the skin. Okay, so there are number of capillaries, blood vessels and the capillaries which are supplying in this particular region. Okay, so veins and arteries you can see entering and exiting the skin. Okay, so it will further divide into the capillaries. So when you have a cut, small cut onto your skin, immediately blood will ooze out, right, if the cut is sufficiently deeper to the dermis layer. Okay, so if it is a superficial damage, then the blood won't ooze out. Okay, because here there is no blood supply. Okay, apart from this, as I've told you, there are hair, right? So this hair, it has a root, okay, from which actually the growth of the hair starts. This is the hair follicle. Okay, and just as the hair approaches the outer layers, there are glands which are located over here. Okay, so these are known as sebaceous glands or oil glands. So as a name implies, so these will secrete the oil, okay, or lipids. These are generated in this sebaceous glands, which are secreted through these particular openings. Apart from this, there is one more type of gland which is located in the skin, that is the sweat gland. Okay, so these coiled structures which can be seen over here, these are the sweat glands. So there is a duct which is carrying this sweat onto the surface of the skin. Okay, apart from this, you can see that there is adipose layer also deeper to the dermis. Okay, so this is to do with the structure of the skin. So almost entire body, it will have this particular kind of structure of skin. So this is the picture which is illustrating the microscopy of the different types of cells. You can see that each layer of the epidermis, it is made up of different types of cells, right? So this is the stratum corneum, which is the outermost layer, which mainly comprises of the dead keratinocytes. Okay, so dead cells, so which are shed from the skin, right? Then next layer is stratum granulosum. Okay, you can see that there are granules present over here. Okay, so that's why it is known as stratum granulosum. The next layer is stratum spinosum, the deeper to that. Okay, so again here it is made up of keratinocytes, and interspersed in between there are Langerhans cells. Okay, then the deepermost layer of the epidermis is the stratum basale. You can see that it is a single layer cells, right? And here there are another type of cells, Merkel cells are present over here. Okay, even melanocytes also are located in this particular layer, and deeper to this epidermis is present the dermis. And if you can see the lining, it is not exactly the straight lining, right? You can see that there are troughs, and there are peaks over here. So these are known as dermal papillae. So there is no clear-cut demarcation over here. Okay, so one particular layer, it is embedded in the other. Okay, just like a lock and key fits in each other. Okay, so just like there are dermal papillae which will project into the epidermis, and there are epidermal ridges which will fit exactly into this dermal papillae. Okay, so this is to do with the structure of the skin. Coming to the functions of the skin. So skin plays a very important role in thermoregulation, that is the temperature regulation. Sweat basically, which is released or which is secreted onto the skin, it helps in cooling of the skin. Okay, so when there is hot season, summer season, you tend to sweat more, right? So why it happens is because it needs to maintain the body temperature. It by increasing the sweat secretion, it helps in cooling of the skin. Okay, so temperature maintenance is regulated by the skin. The skin also acts as the blood reservoir, as we have seen that there are a lot of blood vessels, blood capillaries, right? So it acts as a reservoir, as a store for the blood. Okay, then next function, important function, is the protection. So our skin, it covers the entire body, right? So it acts as a protective layer. So anything which is coming in contact with the skin, it can't easily enter our body, right? Okay, so it tends to protect our body, our internal organs from foreign substances. Any substance just can't easily cross the skin and enter our body, right? Okay, so it plays a very important role, that is protection. It protects the internal surfaces. Okay, next is cutaneous sensations. Okay, when somebody touches you, you feel that, right? So it has a sense of touch, sense of pain, sense of pressure. Okay, if you feel some hot surface, if you touch some hot surface, you immediately remove your hand, right? Okay, why it happens? It's a reflex actually. But what makes it possible? It's because your skin is sensing that particular temperature or that particular pressure is felt by the skin. Okay, so there are receptors which will feel all these types of sensations. The next important function is excretion and absorption. So as we have seen in the structure of the skin that there are sweat glands. Okay, so in terms of sweat, it excretes certain waste materials in the sweat. Okay, apart from that, certain drugs may also be secreted in the sweat. Okay, so it is one of the pathway of excretion of the waste material. Apart from that, there are certain substances which can be absorbed into the body also. Okay, so not all substances can cross the intact skin. Of course, there are a few examples also of the drugs which can cross the skin. Okay, drugs may be applied in terms of patches, as you all must have studied. So it can cross the skin and enter your systemic circulation. So it could be one of the pathway for absorption of certain substances. Another important function is the synthesis of vitamin D. It takes place in the skin. Okay, so these are some of the functions of skin. Now coming to the types of toxic effects and the dermatotoxicants, examples of the different dermatotoxicants. Now, a number of types of reactions can take place when your skin comes in contact with certain substances. Either the skin directly, the outer layer of the skin may get affected, or the appendages, that is the hair or the sebaceous glands or the sweat glands, may also get affected over here. Okay, so the different types of toxic effects which can be produced on the skin are primary irritation, sensitization reaction, photosensitivity, contact urticaria or urticarial reactions, and effects on the epidermal appendages, as we have seen. Okay, so these may also get affected by certain drugs. Now we'll see one by one all of these in detail. Coming to the first type of toxic effect on the skin, that is primary irritation. Okay, so as the name implies, irritation. Okay, so you all must have experienced this type of irritation on the skin, right? If you get hurt or if you get have a sting, your skin irritates, or if you come in contact with say some irritant substance or some solvents which are irritant in nature, say for example some acids or alkalis, if they come in contact with your skin, or some detergents, if they come in contact with your skin, it produces an uneasiness, right? You feel irritant like feeling, right, over there, so that you tend to scratch that particular area. Okay, so when your skin comes in direct contact with such irritant substances, it will result in primary irritation. Now why this term primary irritation is used is because this type of irritation, it will be produced upon first exposure to that particular chemical. So even if your skin is coming in contact with that particular substance for the first time, it will result in the irritation. So that's why it is known as the primary irritation. So the symptoms which may be produced, it may be hyperemia. Okay, a wide variety of symptoms may be produced, from mild to severe. Say a simple hyperemia, that is increase in the blood flow to that particular area may take place, so that redness will be seen. Okay, or edema, because of the vasodilatation, the blood flow will increase over there, blood may ooze out of the blood vessels. Okay, and edema, the swelling may be produced in that particular region, or vesiculation, that is say blistering may take place, some blebs, raised blebs may be seen on the skin. Okay, some eruptions may be seen, those are known as vesiculation. Okay, or sometimes it can be quite dangerous, it may result in corrosion or ulceration may take place, that skin may get damaged in that particular region. Okay, so it can be quite severe also at times. Okay, so this particular primary irritation, as we have seen that upon first contact with that particular substance, it will result in the irritant reaction, which may range from mild to severe symptoms. So it is different from the sensitization. Okay, again the sensitization also, irritation will take place, some skin reactions will take place, similar type of reactions will take place. But the difference is that in case of primary irritation, first exposure itself will start precipitating the effects, whereas that is not the case with the second type of toxic effect, that is sensitization reaction. So here, upon the first exposure or the first contact with that particular substance with your skin, it may show little or no reaction. Okay, when first time your skin encounters this type of substance which can induce sensitization reaction. However, upon subsequent exposure, okay, after that, if you again happen to come in contact with that same chemical for the second time, a more severe type of reaction can get precipitated. The first time you are exposed to that chemical, or if you come in contact, it may not result into any severe type of reaction, but the second exposure it may produce some severe reaction. Okay, so this type of reactions, it may be induced maybe say a few days after the exposure to the few years after the exposure. Okay, you may never know. At the time of first exposure, you may not feel anything. So you will think that this particular chemical is harmless. But that is not the case. Sometimes second exposure will, produce these reactions even months or years later also. So that even you may not remember what kind of chemical you came in contact with. Okay, so these type of reactions which are elicited, it may be delayed. Okay, it may be delayed for particular hours, or sometimes it may be delayed for particular years also. So that's why it is known as delayed type of hypersensitivity. Okay, so here a complex immune mechanism is involved in eliciting this type of reactions. Okay, so that particular toxicant or that particular substance which is coming in contact with your skin, it enters the skin and it gets bound to the surface of certain cells, and these cells, when it gets bound to this particular substance, it will be identified by your T lymphocytes and it will remember it in the form of a foreign substance. Okay, so T lymphocytes, these are involved in the immunological reactions, right? So if any foreign substance enters into your body, it will react, right? It will start producing the antibodies and it will start destroying that particular antigen, right? So first exposure, it will remember that type of substance, it will remember it as an antigen, and upon subsequent exposures, it will tend to release certain substances, okay, which will result in the series of reactions which may result in terms of hyperemia or edema and so on. Some types of skin reactions may be precipitated upon subsequent exposures. So some of the examples are quoted over here. Antibiotics like neomycin can precipitate this type of reaction, sensitization reaction. Drugs, if you consider local anesthetic, benzocaine can also result in this sensitization reaction. Several types of metals also are responsible, or pesticides, or certain poisonous plants, poison ivy or poison oak. These may also, when come into contact with the skin, it may result in sensitization reactions. And the next type of toxicity towards the skin is the photosensitivity. So as the name implies, your sensitivity of your skin is increased whenever it is getting exposed towards the light. Photosensitivity. Okay, so your skin is sensitized towards a specific wavelength of light, okay, upon exposure to a particular type of chemical. Okay, so photosensitivity, it is a cutaneous reaction which is resulting from the drug induced sensitization of the skin towards the UV radiation. Okay, so if your skin, it comes into contact with this type of drug or chemical, it will result in some type of alterations into your skin, and upon exposure to the UV radiation of that particular region of your skin, it will start precipitating certain skin reactions. Okay, now this photosensitivity reactions, these are of two types. It can be either phototoxic or it can be photoallergic. Okay, now let us see what are these two types and how they differ from each other. Coming to the first one, that is first type of photosensitivity reaction, that is phototoxic type of reaction. So here the drug or its metabolites, it starts accumulating in your skin. So once it accumulates in the skin, it will absorb the light and it undergoes the photochemical reaction. Okay, photochemical reaction, those reactions which take place in presence of light. So firstly your drug will accumulate in your skin locally in that region, and upon exposure towards the light, photochemical reactions will take place, followed by photobiological reactions. So it will start interacting with your biological macromolecules. So this will result in the local tissue damage, sunburn like reactions. So it will be characterized by erythema, that is reddening will take place, or edema will take place, or blistering which may be followed by hyperpigmentation. Okay, pigmentation of the skin, reddish appearance will take place, or desquamation sometimes, that is the peeling of the skin may also take place. The damaged skin may be peeled off also. Specifically these type of phototoxic reactions, these take place upon the exposure to the UV light of shorter wavelengths, that is ranging from 290 to 320 nanometers. So these are actually responsible for the phototoxic reaction, and the drugs which are responsible for precipitating these type of phototoxic reactions, these include the tetracyclines and the tar products. These are basically responsible for acute phototoxic reaction, that is the reactions which may have a sudden onset, okay, quick onset and short lasting. Whereas there are certain other types of drugs like nalidixic acid, fluoroquinolone, sulfone, sulfonamides, thiazides and amiodarone. These can precipitate a chronic and low grade sensitization type of reaction upon exposure to this UV light. Okay. And the next type of photosensitivity reaction is photoallergic type of reaction. So here the drug or its metabolite, it will induce a cell mediated immune response again. Okay, so immune response is initiated. Okay, so this particular immune response which occurs upon the exposure to the light of longer wavelength, that is 320 to 400 nanometer of the UV light. Okay, so this will produce some skin reaction, papular or eczematous contact dermatitis like symptoms, that is the reddening of the skin will take place, hives will be appearing. Okay, so as if hives means some raised area will be seen which will be reddish in color, similar to that reaction which is shown by histamine, the triple response which is shown by the histamine when it is released locally. So it will show a typical redness, a spot, a redness in that particular area, wheal, flare. So similar type of reactions, skin reactions will be precipitated. Okay. Now the types of drugs which are responsible for this type of reaction include sulfonamides, sulfonylureas, then chloroquine and griseofulvin. Okay, so upon exposure to the sun, it will start precipitating the immediate type of reaction, flare and wheal. Okay, so swelling in that particular region, redness in the surrounding area because of the arterial dilatation will take place. Okay. And the next type of toxicity towards the skin is contact urticaria or urticarial reaction. Okay, so this type of reactions occur in the form of urticaria or eczema, that is rashes may appear on the skin, okay, which is characteristic of that particular drug. Upon contact with that particular substance, rash will appear, the hives will be appearing onto the skin, okay, or sometimes blistering may take place, scaling of the skin also may take place. Now the mechanism which is involved in this contact urticaria, it may be either non-immunologic or it may be immunologic, depending upon what type of chemical is getting exposed. Okay. So non-immunologic mechanism, that is here immune reactions is not evoked. So it is encountered when the skin is exposed to drugs like aspirin or methyl nicotinate. Whereas when the skin is exposed to the latex rubber or the penicillin, it may involve a immunological reaction. So immune system may get activated. Okay. Apart from this, there are again several other examples which may precipitate this type of reactions. These include certain metals or certain drugs, certain antibiotics or local anesthetics may also induce the contact urticaria. Okay, so as I've told you earlier, this is characterized by typical hives. Okay, so pruritic red wheals will be erupting onto the skin. Okay, so large wheals will be seen. Okay, circular patches will be seen onto the skin, raised patches will be seen. Even sometimes these particular reactions may be quite severe that asthma may also get precipitated. Okay, and these symptoms, they last for less than 24 hours, so they will retract within 24 hours. Okay, so it will get normalized. So it is a short lasting type of reaction, but sometimes the chemical may also induce anaphylaxis. Okay, so this is a severe type of reaction wherein severe rashes may appear onto the skin, or sometimes the patient may even faint in this particular situation. Okay, anaphylactic shock it is known as, or sometimes the death of the person may also occur if it is quite severe and acute reaction, if it is precipitated. Okay, now this type of reactions which are seen under this type of toxicity, it involves the immediate type of hypersensitivity, that is type 1 hypersensitivity. So upon exposure to that particular substance, it will activate the mast cells. Okay, so there are mast cells which stores several autocoids. Okay, histamine is one of them. So various mediators of the inflammation are stored in these mast cells. So when this chemical comes in contact with this mast cell, it will activate this mast cell. Okay, maybe through non-immunological mechanism, or it may even induce an immunological reaction, which in turn will result in binding of IgE immunoglobulins which are located on the mast cell. So as a consequence of this, whether it is immunological reaction or non-immunological mechanism, but it will start activating the mast cell. As a result of this, the degranulation of the mast cell will take place. Okay, so whatever stored substances are there within the mast cell, it will get released. Okay, so there are several mediators which are stored in the mast cell. Histamine is one of them. Okay, so vasoactive substances along with the histamine will be released, and it will start precipitating the local reaction. Vasodilatation will be produced, exudation, the capillary permeability will be increased. Okay, swelling may take place in that particular region, or irritant reaction may take place in that particular region where the release of the histamine or the other mediators are taking place. Okay, so this is basically responsible for the urticaria. And the next type of toxic effects onto the skin is those effects which are basically affecting the epidermal appendages, like hair, sebaceous glands, or the sweat glands. Now coming to the first one, that is hair. So substances like cancer chemotherapeutic agents, okay, so drugs which are used in the treatment of cancer, basically the common side effect of these particular drugs is the loss of hair. Okay, so they will result in the affecting the growth of the hair. Okay, so they basically affect the anagen phase. In this particular phase, actually the hair growth take place. Okay, so there are certain periods for which the hair grow. There are certain periods for which the hair growth comes to an halt. There are certain periods throughout the year. Okay, now this particular phase in which the hair grow, that particular phase is known as anagen phase. Okay, so basically these chemotherapeutic agents, they affect this anagen phase wherein the hair growth takes place. So as a result of this, it will start shedding the hair. Okay, so the hair loss will take place, say about after the 2 weeks of the therapy. Okay, but once you stop the treatment, once you suspend the treatment, the hair growth will resume after say about 2 months of the stoppage of the treatment. Okay, Then there are certain other drugs also which are responsible for the hair loss by another mechanism, that is they convert this anagen phase wherein the hair growth take place to telogen phase. As I've told you earlier that there are certain periods in a particular year wherein the hair growth halts. So that particular phase is known as telogen phase. So here the follicles, they become inactive, okay, so that the hair growth does not take place further. Okay, so it converts anagen phase to telogen phase and it will result in the hair loss. Okay, now this particular type of hair loss, it generally starts after 24 months of the therapy. Okay, and the drugs which are involved in such type of side effects or the such type of toxic effects include oral contraceptives, anticoagulants, propranolol and triparanol. Okay, so these are the types of drugs which may result in hair loss. Okay, then the next toxicity which can be shown on the sebaceous glands, that is the glands which secrete the lipids or the oils. So these type of glands which are present at the base of the hair, okay, these are holocrine type of glands. That means they release their secretions by the rupture of the plasma membrane. Okay, so these sebaceous glands are holocrine type of glands and their secretion is under the control of several hormones. Say for example androgens, they stimulate the secretions of the sebaceous glands, whereas estrogen, it inhibits the secretion of the sebaceous glands. Apart from these, adrenocortical steroids, thyroid hormones, these also have stimulatory action, that is they will enhance the secretory action of the sebaceous glands. Now as a result of the proliferation of these epithelial cells, follicular epithelial cells of the sebaceous glands, acne may be formed. This is a quite common problem, especially in the females. Okay, so acne, especially in the facial regions, may take place. So this is a problem arising from the alterations in the sebaceous glands. Okay, so the epithelial cells may proliferate, as a result of which the excessive secretion of the gland may take place and it may promote the formation of the acne. The raised blebs will be seen on the skin. Okay. Similar type of reactions are also seen after application of greases or oils, or after consumption of certain drugs or certain substances like iodides or the bromides. These may also increase the formation of acne. Apart from acne, there is one more type of complication which may be seen as a result of effect on the sebaceous gland, that is chloracne. Okay. Now chloracne, this is basically precipitated by chlorinated aromatic hydrocarbons. Okay. Drugs or substances which are containing chlorinated aromatic hydrocarbons. So here a specific type of skin lesions are seen. Okay, that is the straw colored cyst may be seen, or comedones may be seen. That is a raised region, skin colored regions will be seen on the skin. Okay, these are not acne, but these are the raised appearances onto the skin, specifically on the chin region or on the forehead region. So basically why this takes place is, why these chloracne are precipitated is because the sebaceous glands, they are replaced by a keratinous cyst. That is the reason why these chloracne are precipitated. Okay. Now this type of reactions, it may be seen after consumption of certain rice oil which is contaminated with this PCB, that is polychlorinated biphenyls. So in Japan, this particular outbreak of chloracne was seen specifically in these individuals who consumed this rice oil which was contaminated with the PCBs. Okay. And the next appendage which is getting affected is the sweat glands. Okay. So sweat glands, as we have seen, that they secrete the sweat, and in the sweat several substances may get excreted out, including certain drugs. Okay. So also main role of the sweat is to cool down the skin, to adjust the temperature of the skin or the body temperature according to the surrounding. Now sometimes this sweat glands. It secretes the sweat up to the skin through certain ducts, right, which we have seen. So these sweat ducts may get blocked, and this particular condition is known as miliaria. This particular situation is created due to the blockage of the sweat duct. So as a result of which it will affect the excretion of the sweat, okay, or the secretion of the sweat may not take place. Okay, so typically this particular reaction may be seen after the application of phenols or chloroform onto the skin. Okay, so it's better to avoid the contact with certain types of solvents with the skin. Okay, otherwise it may affect the sweat glands. So this is to do with the dermal toxicity. Now coming to the next type of toxicity, that is the ocular toxicity. Now before going into the toxic effects to the eye, let us see a brief description about the structure of the eye. Okay, you all must have studied under your anatomy before this. Okay, so we will just brief on. Basically this eye or the eyeball, it fits in the socket, right, in the orbit of the skull. Okay, so basically the eyeball, it consists of three layers. Okay, outermost layer, okay, the outermost layer of the eye, that is the fibrous tunic. The middle layer is known as vascular tunic. This is the one. And the innermost layer is known as the retina. This is the one. Okay, so cross-sectional view has been shown over here. Transverse section of the eyeball, which has been shown over here. Okay. Now coming to the first layer, the outermost layer, that is known as fibrous tunic. Okay, it is the outermost layer, as I have told you. Okay, so in the anterior region, okay, so in the front region, this particular layer, it is known as the cornea, and the posterior region, it is known as sclera. This part, it is known as sclera. Okay, or the white portion of the eye which is visible, that is known as the sclera. Okay, then the next layer, that is the middle layer, is the vascular tunic. It is also known as uvea. Okay, it is basically comprised of the three parts, that is choroid. Okay, this is the one. Okay, and then the ciliary body. Ciliary bodies are located over here. Okay, so it comprises of ciliary muscles and ciliary processes, which controls this iris and even the lens, the size of the lens. Then the next part is the iris. Okay, so these are the ones, okay, which are shown over here. Iris basically contains an opening, central opening known as the pupil, through which actually the light passes into the eye, and that opening is known as pupil. Okay, pupil generally it is flexible. The iris, they will control the size of the pupil to control the amount of light which is entering your eyes. Then the third and the innermost layer of the eyeball is known as the retina. This is the one. It generally lines the posterior 3/4 of the eyeball over here. It's present only in the posterior region, not in the anterior region. And that portion is known as retina, where actually the visual pathway begins. So it is the retina where actually the image formation will take place. So whatever light is entering into your eyes, it will form an image onto the retina. Okay. Then at the posterior region, there is an optic disc. So optic disc, it is the site where actually the optic nerve, that is the second cranial nerve, it will exit your eyeball. It will take the signal. Whatever you see, it is sensed by, or it is identified by your brain. Okay. When it forms an image onto your retina, it carries the signal through this optic nerve and it reaches the brain, and it will identify what exactly you are looking at. Okay, so this is to do with the visual pathway. Okay, we will not go much into detail with this. Then behind the pupil, this is the pupil, right? Pupil and the iris. Just behind this, within a cavity, is located a lens. Okay, so whatever light is entering into your eye, basically the amount of light which is entering, it will be controlled by the pupils, and further it will be refracted with the help of the lens. A natural lens is present into the eye. Now the space in between the lens and the cornea, that is this region, it is known as the anterior chamber, okay, this particular region, okay, and it is filled with the aqueous humor. Even in this particular region, posterior chamber, which is just behind the iris, over here actually the aqueous humor is formed. Through pupil it will come out, and through this opening, that is the canal of Schlemm, it will be excreted out, this aqueous humor which is present in this particular region, or which is produced in this particular region. And in between the lens and the retina, this particular region is filled with the vitreous humor. Okay. So with this brief introduction to the eye, let us see what are the different toxicants and which are the areas or which are the sites which are affected. So the first region which may get affected into the eye is the cornea. Okay, so the cornea which is actually exposed, is the first part which is getting exposed. So it is quite a delicate structure which may get exposed to the external toxicants or external chemicals. Say for example, certain acids or alkalis, detergents, organic solvents, or even the smog which is present in the air. Okay, it may come in direct contact with the cornea and it may affect it. Even certain drugs which are instilled into the eye for topical action, or certain drugs which are administered systemically, they may also act onto the eye. Say for example, quinacrine, chloroquine or chlorpromazine, these may affect the cornea. Next region which may get affected is the iris, or aqueous humor may get affected, or the ciliary body. Now the iris, these are susceptible to the physical trauma and chemical irritation. Okay. Now this type of chemical irritation which is produced in the iris, it may result in leakage of the serum proteins, the proteins which are present in the blood vessels, they may leak out, or fibrils as well as the leukocytes from the blood vessels, these may leak out, and further they may result in fibroblast metaplasia, that is totally differentiation of one type of cell, that is fibroblast may get differentiated into some other type of cells. So likewise these regions, that is the iris, may get damaged. Okay. Even iris may also get damaged due to liberation of the melanin granules also from the epithelium of the iris. Okay, so it may also result in damage to the iris. Now these iris, okay, basically it is comprised of two types of muscles. Okay, that is a dilator muscle, okay, which is also known as dilator pupillae, and there is a circular muscle, you can see over here. Okay, so these circular muscles also known as constrictor muscle, or they are also known as sphincter pupillae. Okay, now these dilator pupillae, these are basically innervated by the sympathetic system or the sympathetic nerves. Okay, so noradrenaline will be the neurotransmitter which will be actually controlling this particular type of muscle of the iris, whereas the circular muscles or the constrictor muscle, these are basically supplied by the parasympathetic system. Acetylcholine is a neurotransmitter over here. Okay, and iris, as I have told you, it controls the size of the pupil, the opening in which is present in the middle, that is known as the pupil. So as these muscles, these two types of muscles contract or relax, they will change the size of pupil as per the requirement. If there is more light coming in, your pupil will constrict, right, to restrict the amount of light which is entering your eye. Okay, so likewise certain types of drugs may affect this pupil. Okay, so this pupil, it can be dilated, that is the size will be increased by what type of drugs? Those drugs which can contract this dilator pupillae. Okay, so what type of drugs will contract the dilator pupillae? It is innervated by sympathetic system. So sympathomimetics, so those drugs which can act in the same way like your noradrenaline, or parasympatholytics. Okay, so parasympatholytics. So parasympathomimetics will result in contraction of the circular muscles, right? So parasympatholytic drugs will result in relaxation of these muscles. So as a result of this, dilatation of the pupil will take place. On the contrary, constriction of the pupil will take place by parasympathomimetic drugs, those which can contract the circular muscles, or sympatholytic drugs which can block the receptors over here. So these dilator pupillae or the dilator muscles will be relaxed and it will result in constriction of the pupils. Furthermore, the size of the pupils may also be altered by CNS acting drugs like say morphine. Constriction of the pupil will take place, or general anesthetics also can constrict the pupils. Okay. So these are the different types of toxic effects which can be shown on the pupils or the iris. Apart from this, the aqueous humor may also get affected. The secretion or the release, as I've told you earlier, that aqueous humor, it is generally secreted by the epithelium of the ciliary body, right, in the posterior chamber, and it will exit through the pupil and it will enter the anterior chamber and it is drained out through this canal of Schlemm, right. So if due to some reasons, if the iris are inflamed, okay, if there is inflammation or swelling in this particular region, what will happen? It will block the drainage of this fluid, this aqueous humor. It will not be drained out through this canal of Schlemm. So as a result of this blockage, what will happen? There will be increased amount of this aqueous humor in the interior of your eye. So as a result of this, there will be increase in the intraocular pressure. That is, within the eyeball, the pressure will increase due to accumulation of this aqueous humor. So this condition may result in glaucoma. So this particular situation may get precipitated. So type of drugs which can precipitate this type of toxicity is atropine or some other mydriatics which can produce mydriasis. Okay, but actually these can also result in the paralysis of the ciliary muscles also. Okay, so as a result of this dilatation of the pupil, they can block the drainage of this aqueous humor and result into the glaucoma, that is raised intra that is a raised intraocular pressure. Then apart from the atropine or other mydriatics, even the corticosteroids which are either applied locally in the eye or whether it is administered systemically, they can also increase the intraocular pressure and result in glaucoma. Then the next toxicity which can take place to the eye is in terms of lens. Okay, as we have seen that in the posterior chamber, okay, there is suspended lens, right, so which helps in focusing the light which is entering the eye onto the retina for image formation. Okay, so there are a number of substances which can affect the lenticular transparency. The transparency of this lens can get affected. A very common problem is the formation of the cataract. You must have heard of formation of this cataract in the old age, right? In the elderly people, generally they suffer from this type of problem. Okay, that is cataract. So certain drugs can induce this cataract formation. That is, say for example, 2,4-dinitrophenol, corticosteroids or busulfan, then triparanol or thallium. They can induce this cataract. Apart from this, even systemic exposure to certain drugs, it may also result in the cataract. Okay. Now, apart from these exposure to the drugs, there are certain pathological situations which may also promote the cataract formation. That is, diabetic patients are generally more likely to develop the cataract. Apart from this, cataract may also be seen in those infants who are suffering from galactosemia. This is a situation in which the galactose levels are high. Now, why these are increased is because of the inability to convert this galactose to glucose. Okay, because of the deficiency or the absence of this particular enzyme, galactose 1-phosphate uridylyl transferase. So, because this enzyme is absent, this galactose cannot be converted to glucose, and in such individuals or in such infants, there are more chances of development of the cataracts. Apart from this, certain deficiencies of certain nutrients like tryptophan, pet proteins, vitamin E, riboflavin or folic acid may also induce cataract. Okay, now the mechanisms which may underline this cataract formation are not very clear, but these are some of the theories which have been put forth. In case of corticosteroids, it may induce cataract by inhibition of protein synthesis in the lens. Busulfan may interfere with the mitosis of the lenticular epithelial cells. Then triperenol, it may interfere with the sodium pump so that there is increased level of sodium and water in the lens. And dinitrophenol, it may uncouple the oxidative phosphorylation. So these could be various reasons why the cataract could be precipitated. Now, apart from cataract formation, which is actually a permanent damage, but there are some transient lens opacities also which may be produced by certain tranquilizers or some diuretics or diazophenol which may have produced this type of toxic effects in the experimental animals. Okay. In addition to this, the transparency and refraction of the lens may also get affected by dimethyl sulfoxide or parachlorophenyl aniline. Now coming to the toxicity to the retina, certain polycyclic compounds like chloroquine, hydroxychloroquine, thyroidazine, this may result in retinopathy. Okay, that is the function of the retina may get affected due to some damage. Okay, so here the visual acuity, that is the clarity of your vision may get affected. Okay, then the dark adaptation may get affected or retinal pigmentation may take place. Now, hyperoxia and the iodate, these may also result in retinal changes. Hyperoxia, that is increase in the oxygen level in the retina. Okay, now let us see why it is happening. What are those different mechanisms which are resulting in the retinal toxicity? First mechanism is the inhibition of protein metabolism. Okay, so because of this, the toxic effects of chloroquine and hydroxychloroquine may be seen. Okay. Apart from this, increased oxygen supply in the retina. Okay, that is the hyperoxia. Okay, it is opposite to hypoxia. Hyperoxia is the increased oxygen supply to the region. So it will result in the vasoconstriction. So as a result of vasoconstriction, the blood supply will be decreased, the nutrient supply will be decreased, so it will result in the retinopathy. Apart from that, the iodate, it may affect the pigment epithelium. Okay, so there may be derangement which may result in degeneration of the rod cells. Okay. So the different types of mechanisms are involved in the retinal toxicity. These include the formation of the membranous cytoplasmic bodies like myeloid bodies, or degenerative changes in the rods and cones, or derangements in the intracytoplasmic rods, or appearances of the vacuoles around the rods. So these are several mechanisms which may be involved in the retinal toxicity. And the next part which may get affected is the optic nerve. So optic nerve itself may get damage. So as a result of damage to the optic nerve, the vision may get affected. Now when you look at a particular object, okay, when you are looking at a particular object, apart from that particular object, you will be you will see several objects surrounding it, right? When you are looking at a particular object, it's not that only that object is visible to you. The surrounding regions are also visible, right? But what you are looking at, that will be more clear as compared to the outer regions, right? So that particular vision is known as the central vision, okay, which will be more clearer. Whereas the peripheral vision is that vision which will appear a little bit blur. Okay, but still you can see that surrounding region, right? So there are certain substances which can affect the central vision, and there are certain drugs which can affect the peripheral vision, and there are certain examples which can affect the both type of vision. Okay, so examples which can affect the central vision are methanol, carbon disulfide, disulfiram, ethambutol, and thallium. Okay, on the other hand, this quinine, chloroquine, pentavalent arsenic, carbon monoxide, it actually causes the contraction of the visual field. Okay, that is the region which you can see. actually the whole field which you can see. When you are looking at some object, it's not only that object which you can see, but you can see surrounding regions also. So that particular region which you can see is known as visual field. So constriction of that visual, you will see less of that field. Okay. Apart from that, it will also affect the peripheral vision. Then this nitrobenzol, it can affect both the central vision as well as the peripheral vision. Okay, so these are some of the notable examples. Ethambutol causes optic neuritis, then chloroquine retinopathy, chloramphenicol retinal pigmentation, and digoxin causes scotoma. Okay, that is contraction of the visual field. Then the next type of local toxicity is the ototoxicity. So before going into the ototoxicity, that is the toxicity towards the ear, let us see what is the anatomy of the ear. Okay, so ear basically it is divided into three regions. External ear, okay, which basically collects the sound waves and channels them or moves them inwards. The middle ear, which conveys the sound vibrations to the oval window, which will open into the internal ear, and the internal ear, actually houses the receptors for the hearing and the equilibrium. Now coming to the external ear or the outer ear, it consists of the auricle, this is the one, auricle, external part of your ear, then the external auditory canal, this one, and the eardrum or the tympanic membrane, this one. Okay, so this comprises the external ear. The middle ear, it is actually an air-filled cavity which is located over here. It begins from this eardrum or tympanic membrane, and it is just a cavity up to this opening of the internal ear. That is the bony part, okay, which is present over here. The oval window and the round window, these are the two openings which are lined by the middle ear. Okay. Then the internal ear or the inner ear, it is comprising of the labyrinth. It is also called as labyrinth because a number of complex channels will be present over here, or canals will be present. Okay, these are the semicircular canals. It also comprises of the cochlea. So here it is filled with the endolymph, and the signals, the impulses which are reaching, it will vibrate this tympanic membrane, and these impulses are carried towards the internal ear. It will identify, and the signal is carried by the vestibulocochlear nerve, that is the 8th cranial nerve, towards the brain for identification. Now coming to the ototoxicity. Ototoxicity, as the name implies, it is a property of being toxic to the ear. Yes, specifically the cochlea or the auditory nerve, and even sometimes the vestibular system may get affected. Okay, so either topical application of the drug, instillation of your drug into the ear, or certain systemically administered drug may also result in ototoxicity. So it may result in hearing impairment. Okay, so it may affect the hearing of the particular person. The deafness may sometimes be precipitated. So as far as possible, avoid such type of drugs which can precipitate ototoxicity in those patients who are already suffering from hearing impairment. Okay, so the types of drugs which can result in ototoxicity, these include salicylates, aminoglycosides, these are antibiotics, macrolides, chloroquine, cisplatin, and chloramphenicol. Okay, so many types of antibiotics are responsible for ototoxicity, so you should be very careful while instilling them into your ears. Okay, so these are the different types of local toxicities, the dermal toxicities, then the ocular toxicity, and the ototoxicity. Thank you.